Hello everyone, Adrienne here. I'm gonna be your phlebotomist today. Relax guys, it's a pen. So, judging from the title and the intro to today's video, you guys are probably guessing I'm going to be talking about my career as a phlebotomist, and you guys are definitely correct. And I do want to say that one of the reasons I did want to make a video about this is because it has become a passion of mine, you know, obviously, or else I wouldn't be having it as a career. And it did take a great deal of time for me to actually get a career as a phlebotomist, but I will be getting into that. So I do want to say that this is not going to be any kind of scripted video. This is just sort of off the cuff, really impromptu kind of video. I really did not lay this out very much at all. I'll be talking about, you know, why I got into it, what the training was like, applying for the job as well, getting the job, and I'll also be talking a little bit about my usual like everyday work day, but I won't be going into any kind of like work specific details, and I'm not going to be telling you guys where I work because, you know, that would be bad, and it's not that kind of, you know, spilling the tea sort of video. It's not anything like that at all. And then a few of you asked me a couple of questions about my job, and I will be answering those as well. So, why did I get into phlebotomy, you ask? Well, very, very simple and kind of weird answer, but it will make sense once I explain why. Severe airborne allergies. That sounds really, really strange, but hear me out. So when I was living in Yakima for a majority of my life, unfortunately the climate over there is less than friendly, less than kind, especially on someone who is literally allergic to everything that could possibly grow in a hot, dry area. Oh man, that was rough. That was so rough. Because I've had these allergies my entire life, including like hay fever. I was allergic to tumbleweeds, because who the fuck is allergic to tumbleweeds? Me, that's who. And certain species of sage, certain species of dry grass I was super allergic to. Even if I was like walking through a field and my legs were totally covered, the incidental little plant kind of going through my clothes and scratching at my skin would just turn disgusting, nasty, and puffy and red. You know, severely allergic to everything that grows in a hot and dry area, which is exactly what Yakima is. Very little rainfall, very little moisture in the air, and very little relief. And considering how hot it got in the summer, it was unbearable. And I also have low blood pressure. So because I have low blood pressure, when you combine the heat along with the allergies and my low blood pressure, you have a recipe for disaster. And that's one of the top reasons why I really did not go outside very much when I was living in Yakima, was because of my allergies and also because of my heat sensitivity. So let's say I went out there one day, I might as well have been walking around in a hazmat suit and had like a nurse on hand or something just in case I passed out and, you know, hit the ground like a sack of potatoes. It was terrible. Seriously, bad. Like, there were so many times where I would be so overheated that I would be on the verge of passing out and very nearly follow through with it. Terrible. Kenny was really worried about my health when I was living there. Throughout this time that I was a kid, and leading up into my mid-teen years, I had tried all of those different methods to treat allergies, and all of the allergy medication that I would take would just knock me out. It would put me in a coma. You know, it's kind of like Zyrtec, because you can't sneeze if you're in a coma. It's true. It's literally true. And like I said, the local honey thing did not work either. Terrible. I was really, really disappointed about that as well. And the reason why I bring these things up is because I know there may or may not be someone in the comments who's going to be like, well, didn't you try this? Didn't you try this? Didn't you try this before you had to go on allergy shots? And the answer is yes. I tried all of it. That's why I went to go see an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And that's why I was put on allergy injections. So I went to this ear, nose, and throat doctor in Yakima. He was really, really good. And he was able to determine that, yes, you were literally allergic to everything around here. And, you know, I did the test where they stuck you with a whole bunch of needles right here on the arm to see what puffed up, and then measuring the spots that puffed up to determine what it was you were the most allergic to. It was really funny because, like I said, allergic to literally everything that grew in hot, dry weather. I was not, however, allergic to mold, which the doctor found extremely surprising, and it's a really good thing that I moved because I live in a much better climate now. It's much wetter, and my allergies have gotten significantly better since moving here, which I'm so grateful for. So based on that information, he did determine that my allergies were pretty chronic and could not be treated by those other things that I had mentioned before. So I had to go on weekly allergy injections. So first I would have to drive to the clinic and get that done. The nurse over there would call me into the room, they'd give me the 2 shots, and then I'd wait 20 minutes to see if I had any kind of allergic reaction, just in case. There's always a risk, of course. You know, I never had a bad reaction to it, ever. I would just get sore on the arm, or eventually sore on the leg. So then eventually it got to a point where they deemed that I was stable enough for them to allow me to take my shots when I was at home. So that was a little more convenient than driving to the clinic every week to get that done, so I didn't mind that at all. So for a while, my mom was administering the shots, and then eventually I began self-administering the shots. So you guys can probably imagine, after about a decade of getting stabbed with needles and then eventually stabbing yourself with needles, that you get very comfortable with needles very quickly. Not only that, you kind of have to teach yourself to put the needle in at a certain angle that will cause the least amount of discomfort. And that's definitely something that I learned how to do. So by the time Kenny and I moved to the island almost 2 years ago now, it's crazy to think about, I still had a little bit of my materials for my weekly antigen injections, which is great. I wanted to keep taking them until they were gone so that any residual allergies that I had, I would adapt to the climate a little bit better by the time I moved to a wetter area, such as Whidbey Island. Does that make sense? So once a week I would stab myself with 2 needles. Kenny would have to kind of stand by and watch me for 20 minutes to make sure that I didn't have any kind of bad reaction and didn't have to go to the hospital. But again, never had any. These shots really worked wonders over the course of many years. And just to give you an idea of how severe these allergies were, they were kind of arresting my vocal development as a singer. Like, I was having these really long plateaus where I really wasn't making any progress, I wasn't improving, I was getting frustrated, my voice teacher was getting concerned, and she got concerned about my allergies because they were so bad as well. And, you know, I don't blame her. So when Kenny and I were getting ready to move to Whidbey Island, we were looking at a couple of different professions that either of us could go into. At the time, shortly before we moved, we were looking into phlebotomy when we both lost our jobs in like late 2018 and were thinking about moving here. There were institutions and areas around the Yakima Valley that did teach phlebotomy, but it would be like 3 to 6 month courses, and it would be thousands upon thousands of dollars because it was done via the community college. Shocker, right? So when Kenny and I finally decided to move, after a little while we decided to pick up on that and see if there were some better options for learning about phlebotomy on this side of the mountains, and boy were we right. So Kenny heard about this very brief course in phlebotomy that was based in the Seattle area. It was 6 weeks, and then you take the national exam, you have a practical exam, and then eventually you can submit your information to get your license in phlebotomy and everything like that. So I was really, really excited about that. And then when I saw the price tag on going to this kind of crash course, I'm just like, I gotta do this. This is a really good opportunity. I really gotta do this. This is gonna be great. And it was. It really was. So these classes were based in the Seattle area. So what I would do is that the night before my class, I would go to the Linwood area and I would spend the night with my friend Heather and her girlfriend, and then the next morning make the shorter commute to the class. So that was really convenient. That was easy. I got to see my friend Heather again. I haven't seen her since college at that point. It was so nice to see her. Really nice. Actually, no, there was a lunch that we had one time in between that point, but that, you feel me, you get it. So first day of class comes, and I found it funny how many people in my phlebotomy class were actually afraid of needles. And some of them were going into training to be nurses, some of them were just going to be phlebotomists, some were getting recertified, that kind of thing. But the fact that most of them were afraid of needles really made me laugh, because I'm just like, you guys are going into a career involving needles and you're afraid of needles. I just found it way too funny. So when I shared my story to my class and my instructor about how having airborne allergies that were really severe enough for me to give myself allergy injections for about a decade, they were pretty impressed by that. They're just like, wow, well, if you can do it to yourself, you can do it to other people just fine. And I'm like, yeah, that's my thinking. And then at the end of the very first day of class, we were already sticking each other with needles. And my instructor watched me do it, and she said that for my first time it was damn near perfect. And I just felt really, really empowered and excited. And I'm just like sitting there thinking, just, wow, I have finally found my calling. I have finally found a day job that I can get passionate about, that isn't involved with customer service or food service or being a secretary or anything like that. Just, I felt really satisfied. I really did. I felt like a fish that found a vast ocean of possibilities. So the 6 weeks came and went. I learned a lot. Like I said, it was a crash course. Kenny was wonderful about helping me retain all this information so that I could pass my national exam. He was even there to help me pass my practical exam. I'll tell you this much, that is a sign of true love right there. If your significant other is willing to show up for your practical exam to help you pass it so that you can become a phlebotomist, that's true love. That really is. And this was actually a couple months before we got engaged too, so that's even funnier. Nice. So I passed my practical exam, and Kenny also actually helped one of my classmates pass their practical exam as well, because her guest was being a complete dick. Now, the number one way to freak out a phlebotomist is to just be like,
just do it, come on, just do it, come on. The vein's right there, just do it, come on, do it.
Fastest way to freak out a phlebotomist. It's terrible. I really hate it when people do that, but thankfully I've come across very few of those type of people in my work. So I get my certification, and I eventually got my license. And I had a really difficult time trying to find a job in phlebotomy that would accept someone who was technically entry level. Yes, I had the paperwork, I had the license, I had the certification, I had a certain amount of sticks in my stick log, but a lot of the places around here on the island would not hire someone unless, they had at least a minimum 1 year of experience. So that was frustrating. It's that kind of circular vicious cycle of, well, you need experience to get this job. Well, how can I get this job if you won't give me experience? And then just, it's a shit show. It really is. So I was working in food service up until the point where I could get a job in phlebotomy. And it was pretty rough, I will admit, waiting for something bigger and better to come along. So finally, I posted about a job interview that I had on my personal Facebook page, and a friend of mine messaged me, and she said, hey, we really need phlebotomists down at this hospital. I work there currently. We could really use someone. I'll put in the good word for you. Go try an interview for it. And lo and behold, I tried again and I got a job interview with them, which was wonderful. I was being interviewed by 3 people, which, you know, I kind of treat it like a performance, so it's not quite as nerve-wracking. And I did let them know, you know, I do have the paperwork you guys need, so you don't need to, you know, certify me yourself or wait for my license to come around or anything like that. I have the paperwork, I just don't have the experience yet. And we came to an agreement that even though the job posting did say minimum 1 year of experience, because I had the paperwork and they really needed people, I was able to get that job. And I was thrilled beyond belief when I found out. The day that I found out, I was on my lunch break at my job at the time, and I saw the email. I cried tears of relief. Oh my God. I was just relieved and joyful at the same time. So I have been working there about 2 months now. Like I said, I seriously love my job. You know, when I worked in food service, I would get up every morning and just whine to Kenny and just like, I don't want to go to work. You know, we all know that feeling. But every morning when I wake up to go to my job as a phlebotomist, I'm like, my eyes pop open at the crack of dawn and I'm excited. And, you know, I go and make my coffee and I come in here and I do my makeup every single day. You know, I'm just thrilled and pumped and energized to go to work, and I've never felt that way about any kind of job before in my life. It's wonderful. It really is. So in a typical day of work, I'm, you know, going to various rooms and departments around the hospital, such as, you know, the maternity ward and, you know, other departments and the emergency room to draw blood, or I am doing outpatient blood draws or inpatient blood draws, either way. And God, it's just so much fun. It really is. Not only are you doing something that you're good at and that you enjoy, you're also doing something to help people. And that's another reason why I love my job so much, is I love helping people. And I actually had a phone call with my mom a little while ago, and she's just like, oh, Adrian, you must be a little bit of a sadist working there. You really like seeing people in pain. That's why you poke. And I'm just like, Mom, my goal here is to reduce the amount of discomfort that someone feels when they get their blood drawn. That doesn't make me a sadist. Of course, I know my mom was probably just kidding around, whatever. Now, mind you, like I said, I have been on both sides of the needle. I've been on the side where I have gotten stuck, and I have been on the side where I am sticking, and I also have a really good pain tolerance. You know, I have a fairly large tattoo that is not exactly simple. Let's just put it that way. So I do like to empathize and sympathize with my patients when they come in to get their blood drawn. It's really nice. And when they tell me that I do a good job, or they tell me that that was the best stick they ever had, or that, oh wow, you're really good. You know, you really know what you're doing. You got my vein right away, and that didn't even hurt. It makes me feel really good. And I will admit that while sometimes I do come home from work and I am tired, I still feel invigorated and I still feel ready to tackle the next day. And also, let me just say, I love the people that I work with. I have learned so much from the other phlebotomists that I have had the pleasure of working with. We're all a bunch of freaks. I love it. So my friends, both Angela Benedict and Ashley Morgan, love you guys, you're amazing. Ashley Morgan was actually the one who partly inspired my makeup look today. She did kind of a goth eyeliner look on her Instagram, and I love it. You guys should totally go check her out, and she also has a YouTube channel. So they both kind of asked a similar question. With Angela, she said, how do you deal with people who have a fear of needles? And Ashley asked, what do you do about the scaredy cats or people who pass out? So with people who have a fear of needles or people who are scaredy cats, personally, I know that it's one of those cases where they psych themselves up into thinking it's going to be worse than it actually is, and that usually tends to be the case. So this sounds weird, but whenever I go in with a needle and I'm getting ready to poke them, I tell them, okay, big poke. Even if I use a smaller needle, and, you know, they're kind of bracing themselves for it, And they're just like, oh God, oh no. And then when I say big poke, they're expecting it to be big. But then when they find out that it's really not that big of a deal, especially if I'm really gentle, which I usually am, and then they're just like, oh, that wasn't so bad after all. So it's a little bit of a reverse psychology thing, and I find that that does help them kind of brace themselves for the needle and kind of result in a better experience next time they have to get their blood drawn. Another thing too is that with people who do have a fear of needles, I find that if I do use a smaller needle, it tends to be less painful and less of a horrifying experience for them just in general. Because we use butterfly needles that are 2 different sizes, and we also use straight needles. I tend to use the butterfly needles that are the smallest for the ones that are usually really apprehensive with needles, and that does tend to help their experience go by a little bit more pleasantly than if they got a huge needle in there. You know what I mean? Now, as for people who pass out, it's a little bit different. A lot of the times people are pretty awesome about letting me know whether they do have a history of passing out when they get their blood drawn, which is nice because I kind of am able to prepare accordingly. You know, I will use a smaller needle so it's not as bad. I will also make sure that they get some water beforehand because that tends to help. And during the blood draw, I will remind them to keep breathing, because usually the number one reason why people pass out when they are getting their blood drawn is because they freak out and forget to breathe. So I typically talk them through that and be like, okay, take a deep breath and out, take a deep breath and out. And that tends to help. It really, really, really does help. And if it's possible, like if I'm in the emergency room, for instance, I will try to have a nurse on hand just in case they do have a vasovagal episode. So yeah, syncope is actually the official medical term for fainting. And my dear friend Perfumed Ladybird asks, does someone telling you they have bad veins make you nervous? I apologize for mine. Now, it doesn't necessarily make me nervous, but it usually tells me that they have a good deal of experience with getting their blood drawn, and they really haven't had much success due to their crappy veins. Now, while it doesn't make me nervous, it usually does inform me, okay, I need to use a couple of my tricks to make the veins pop out more, like maybe tying the tourniquet a little tighter, or possibly using a heating pack on the area that I'm intending to draw to make the veins pop out a little bit more. Maybe it's, rubbing their arm a little bit. That tends to help as well. And sometimes if they do have bad veins, they will let me know, oh hey, they get me on this arm in this spot, or oh hey, they get me on the back of the hand in this spot. That typically works the best. I also make a point of when I am done drawing said patient, I do let them know, oh hey, next time you get your blood drawn, please tell the phlebotomy technician that, you usually get it done on the back of your hand with a butterfly needle, or get it done with a butterfly needle on this arm. This is where your good vein is. So that it makes the next experience that they have a little bit easier. But that's just me. Kriya, the artsy mama, asks, did you become a phlebotomist because you're secretly a vampire and need the blood? I cannot tell you how many times I have heard the vampire jokes when I'm at work, but I roll with it. I embrace it. And it doesn't help that I'm also a goth with very long black hair, that, I get the Addams Family jokes, I get the vampire jokes. I really don't mind it at all. I really don't. But to answer your question, no, I did not become a phlebotomist because I'm a vampire and need blood. I promise, I just really love my job. Mrs. Vamp asks, have you ever got some weird comments from clients? P.S. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you, love. I appreciate it. So as far as weird comments go, I mentioned all the vampire jokes and the Addams Family jokes. And sometimes I even get the Addams Family jokes from my coworkers, but that's okay. I've noted, not necessarily weird, but every now and then, I'll get a really nice old lady that comes in and, she has to get her blood drawn. Now, when I'm at work, I do not wear my hair loose like this, and as you can see, I have quite a lot of hair. Now, what I like to do is I like to keep it in a braid behind me, one singular braid behind me, so it's out of my way and it's not hurting my head, because I hate having my hair up in a bun. It's terrible. It really, really hurts because it's so heavy. But I don't know what it is with my long black hair in a braid and little old ladies, but they love it. I don't understand why. If someone can tell me why little old ladies love long black braided hair, I'd really love to know. I really would. And then they also ask me how long it took to grow my hair out, so sometimes that can be a little funny. Every now and then I'll get middle-aged men complimenting me on my hair as well. It's weird. And this last question is from my friend Nephelith. She says, tips to overcome a severe phobia of needles. So when it comes to having a phobia of needles, I do notice that it tends to be related to apprehension about the pain that they are anticipating they will feel when they do get their blood drawn. Sometimes they will feel faint from the perceived incredible loss of blood, I guess, if that makes sense. And if you think about it, if you look at the tubes that we use to draw blood, it's really not that much blood that we're drawing. I really don't think it's more than a single pint of blood that I have drawn in the past when it comes to doing blood tests. I would say that if you want to overcome your fear of needles, you could probably try going to donate blood, and hopefully you'll have a phlebotomist that knows what they're doing over there, and they'll be able to find a vein right away, kind of talk you through it, so that way you get a little bit more familiar with the process of getting your blood drawn. Make sure that you stay hydrated, of course. Really, really good idea to stay hydrated. And I would say that if you do have a fear of needles and you go get your blood drawn, let the phlebotomist know that you aren't a big fan of needles so that they can accommodate you accordingly, such as using a smaller needle, such as, talking you through it, such as reminding you to breathe. Because again, in my opinion, in my experience as well, like the number one reason why people pass out when they get their blood drawn is because they freak out and stop breathing or forget to breathe. So make sure to breathe. I would also say that if you're someone who has like tattoos or piercings, for instance, maybe kind of a little bit of exposure therapy might be a good way to help get over your fear of needles. That's just my recommendation, but I would say that mindfulness is probably your best, top thing for helping to deal with your phobia of needles. And I've found that sometimes, like I said, with exposure therapy, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to make myself do this thing so I'm not as afraid of it anymore. With Kenny, and one of the reasons that he was really not too apprehensive about helping me with my practical exam is that he had been giving blood for a number of years, so needles really did not bother him. So because of that, by the time I dragged him along to my phlebotomy practical exam, it was a breeze for him. He was just like, yeah, no, you can keep going. Yeah, you're good. Keep going. You're good. You're fine. I can do it. You're good. And my instructor was just like, are you sure you don't need a break? And he's like, no, I'm fine. Oh, that man is so sweet. But anyway, exposure therapy and mindfulness, I would say, is probably the best two options for helping to get rid of your fear of needles. But that's just me. It may not work for everyone. And again, please communicate to your phlebotomist or whoever it is that's drawing your blood that you're not a fan of needles so that they can adjust accordingly. Alright guys, so that was my video on, why I got into this profession of being a phlebotomist, what I love about it, what life is like, and kind of answering your questions. If you do have any additional questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. I would love to answer those questions for you. So as always, subscribe to my channel and make sure you hit that bell for notifications so that you can be notified every time I post a video. And thank you so much to my patrons for your support. You guys are absolutely fantastic. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. You guys are amazing. I love you, and I will see you guys later. Bye!
Thank you.